If you have even a passing interest in the paranormal, you likely have been made aware in recent years of the UFO videos released by the Pentagon.
Well, if there's a thing, it's rotating.
Now, this compelling footage shows what appears to be unidentified flying objects captured by fighter pilots sent to the investigator radar returns. One of the clips comes from pilots assigned to the USS Nimitz carrier strike group in 2004 and depicts what many have dubbed the Tic Tac, a white lozenge-shaped object capable of incredible feats of speed and maneuverability.
They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude.
Now, in this encounter, known as the Tic Tac footage, the object soared over the ocean off the coast of Southern California before vanishing from view. Something you may not know about the Tic Tac footage, however, is the impression from pilot David Fravor that something else might have lurked beneath the water below the craft. This led Fravor to speculate in the late 2020 interview with podcaster Lex Fridman that the craft he was tracking might have vanished into the very ocean itself. He said, "Think about it. If you're gonna hide on this planet, what's the least explored spot on the planet? 2/3 of its ocean." Fravor's astute observation fits into a line of ufological speculation that stretches back for several decades. You might be surprised to learn that there are hundreds of cases, perhaps thousands, where flying saucers and other UFOs are seen gathering H2O from a variety of sources. Everything from reservoirs to water towers to natural bodies. Now, alongside these reports are an equal number of unidentified flying objects emerging from or descending into the water, be it a river, a lake, or most commonly, the ocean itself. In their attempt to explain such sightings, ufologists have studied this from every angle. Some, like Carl Feint in his book UFOs in Water, entertain the possibility that UFOs need water for some undisclosed purpose, which we don't know, and that perhaps extraterrestrials hide their secret bases deep within the world's oceans. Others favor a crypto-terrestrial hypothesis that perhaps these beings never came from the stars, but instead represent another civilization that co-evolved on Earth alongside our very own. One of the best examinations of this possibility is cryptozoologist Ivan T. Sanderson's 1970 book, Invisible Residents. Now, Sanderson wrote, "If a superior technological type of intelligent civilization developed on this planet underwater, they would very likely have gotten much further ahead than we have, having had several millions and possibly up to 1 billion years head start on us, life as we know it having started in at the sea." Now, stories abound of bizarre vehicles seen on, beneath, or entering or leaving the waves. These are known by many names, including mystery submersibles, or most commonly, USOs, unidentified submarine objects. The history of USOs is actually quite old, and it stretches back into antiquity. Even in the modern era, some of our earliest reports are quite dated, stretching back into the 19th century. For instance, on June 18th, 1845, the crew of the brig Victoria actually spotted something strange in the eastern portion of the Mediterranean Sea. Now, as they were watching the waves, a trio of bright glowing objects appeared underwater, only to take off into the sky, where they remained clearly visible for at least 10 minutes. The report was later published 16 years later, by the way, in a report of the British Association. Now, there were multiple witnesses to the incident from a variety of vantage points. One described each craft as 5 times larger than the moon, and all of them sporting an apparatus resembling a sail or streamer. The 3 objects appeared to be somehow tethered to one another. There was also the November 12th, 1887 sighting of an enormous fireball off Cape Race, Newfoundland. The luminous sphere rose out of the sea to a height of 50 feet, where it was witnessed by the crew of the British steamer Siberian. They noted that the object moved against the wind before retreating into the sky, ruling out the possibility of a balloon. Like the 1845 sighting, it was featured in several respected publications, and one of the most famous USOs comes from a report in the July 3rd, 1893 Tacoma Daily Ledger. 2 days earlier, a fishing party camping on Henderson Island, most of whom whom provided their names to the paper, swore they saw something really out of place in the waves after midnight. Now, according to one of the witnesses, since the creation of the world, I doubt if sounds and sights more horrible were ever seen or heard by mortal man. I was in the midst of a pleasant dream when, in an instant, a most horrible noise rang out in the clear morning air, and instantly the whole air was filled with a strong current of electricity that caused every nerve in the body to sting with pain, and a light as bright as that, created by the concentration of many arc lights, kept constantly flashing. At first I thought it was a thunderstorm, but as no rain accompanied it, and as both light and sound came from off bay, I turned my head in that direction, and if it is possible for fright to turn one's hair white, then mine ought to be snow white. For right before my eyes was a most horrible looking monster. By this time, every man in our camp, as well as the men from camp of the surveyors, were gathered on the bank of the stream, and as soon as we could gather our wits together, we began to question if what we were looking at was not the creation of the mind, but we were soon disburdened of the idea, for the monster slowly drew in toward the shore, and as it approached, from its head poured out a stream of water, and it looked like blue fire. All the while, the air seemed to be filled with electricity, and the sensation experienced was as if each man had on a suit of clothes formed of the fine points of needles. One of the men from the surveyor's camp incautiously took a few steps in the direction of the water, and as he did so, the monster darted towards the shore and threw a stream of water that reached the man, and he instantly fell to the ground and lay as though dead. The narrator goes on to explain how one of the men trying to rescue this victim found himself struck down by the electric charge. Everyone fled to the forest amid continuing flashes from the supposed creature before it vanished beneath the waves. The witness, despite insisting that what they saw was a living, breathing creature, described something that sounds much more like a vehicle of some sort. It stretched nearly 150 feet long, 30 feet in circumference at its widest point. Although he thought it was covered with a very coarse hair, the witness said it also sported 6 perfectly round dinner plate sized eyes on a walrus-like head. Do these sound like eyes to you, or portholes? The fact that nearly its entire body was illuminated, combined with the electric shocks that it discharged, it makes the object sound like something more mechanical than biological, unless we're dealing with a truly enormous, aggressive electric eel. To make it even more machine-like, the description referenced a tail shaped like a propeller that seemed to revolve. USO sightings continued through the early 20th century, including noteworthy reports from Alaska in 1945, the North Atlantic in 1954, and a sighting in a New York lake in Westchester County in 1955. Some reports, especially the more mundane ones, where the objects never leave the water, might have more prosaic explanations. In the 1960s and 70s, for example, the waters around Scandinavia were plagued by unknown submarines which no one could identify. It has been credibly speculated that these were no more than spy submarines from the Soviet Union. The possibility, while no less frightening, is much less exotic than underwater civilizations or alien submarines. It wasn't until the 1970s, though, that USOs took on a more explicitly ufological flavor. One of the most famous accounts even involves an abduction. On January 3rd, 1979, Florida resident a Filiberto Cardenas was traveling just north of Miami when his car engine suddenly dies. Now he steps out of his car to check what was wrong, and Filiberto spotted a massive UFO above the car. In full view of everyone, a beam of bright light captured him and pulled him upward into the craft, which then vanished. Now, Filiberto wasn't seen again until 2 hours later. A police officer, William Christian, found him completely disoriented, 16 miles away from where he had disappeared. When at last he recovered, Filiberto told a wild story about meeting 3 human-like aliens aboard a UFO, all of whom wore dark, tight-fitting suits. All of them somehow spoke extremely fluent Spanish and warned him about disasters, both natural and man-made, that's threatened our planet's future. The beings then piloted their craft to a rocky shoreline and submerged beneath the waves. The craft used an enormous fissure in the rock to access an underwater tunnel that terminated in a stunning, submerged metropolis. Now, during his time here as a guest, our captive, depending on your perspective, Filiberto met another human being who claimed to have resided with the aliens for years. After undergoing medical procedures in another room, Filiberto was unceremoniously returned to the Miami Metro. Now, I get that this might sound like nothing more than a tall tale, but Filiberto exhibited disturbing medical ailments in the fallout of his experience. Medical professionals located more than 100 prick marks all over his body, as if his skin had been punctured by tiny needles. Additionally, Filiberto endured dramatic swings in his body temperature that often left him covered in sweat, his thirst unquenchable. When asked by his family to describe the horrible sensations he felt, Filiberto compared it to eating a slice of Sbarro pizza. The USO trend continues into recent years. On July 15th, 2019, footage recorded off the coast of San Diego, California by personnel aboard the USS Omaha showed some sort of sphere in the sky. After gliding along effortlessly, it hovered for roughly 45 seconds, then plunged down into the ocean with a splash. Even though a search was mounted, no one found any craft, nor did they spot any wreckage. The only thing they found were questions. What might be the most recent USO sighting unfolded in Hawaii at the end of 2020. On December 29th, residents throughout Oahu spotted a luminous blue orb in the air above the island. The UFO was recorded by several witnesses, and some of them even hopped in their cars to pursue it. They tracked the orb as long as they could, until at last, after 3 miles, it reached the coast. It headed out to sea, and then without a sound, simply dropped into the ocean. Now, around the same time, another smaller object was also seen ducking behind a mountaintop. Federal Aviation Administration officials had publicly declared that none of the aircraft they were tracking disappeared from radar that night, nor had they received any reports of overdue or missing aircraft. What's interesting about the UFO phenomenon is how nowhere seems off limits. They're in our skies, of course, but are seen on cameras above Earth's atmosphere. UFOs are often seen flying into mountainsides, hinting at subterranean extraterrestrial bases. There are even reports of smaller light phenomena in people's homes. In light of such unprecedented access to every setting, is it really a surprise that UFOs, or more accurately, USOs, seem to swarm on above and beneath the world's oceans? But more importantly, I want to know what you guys think, so be sure to let me know what you think down in the comments below. I would love to know your thoughts and opinions. And if you guys enjoyed today's episode, be sure to go ahead and smack that like and subscribe button for more content just like today's. And as always, guys, I love you all, keep an open mind, and I'll see you guys in the very next episode.